political events in Thailand that will have some significant impact on the future of the country as well. Today, I asked Kun Ken, Kun Metis, Loapanon to sit down with me and to analyze, what he sees as the possible scenarios. Number one, with the Move Forward Party now entering sort of the crucial phase of the trial by the Constitutional Court on whether to dissolve the party as proposed by the Election Commission or not. Then, of course, we have the case of Prime Minister Srettha, who has just submitted his side of the argument on why he should remain as Prime Minister as a result of the complaint lodged by 40 senators against him in his appointment of Kun Pichit Chunban as minister attached to the Prime Minister's office. And then we also have the case of Kun Thaksin Chinawat on June 18 this month as well, going to be officially taken by the chief prosecutor to the court, accusing him of violation of the 112 lèse majesty law. So you see all the main political actors are coming under pressure from various sources. So, Kun Ken, you having followed the political scenarios in the country closely, what do you think would be the most important event among the three events that we can see now?
Well, you've listed three extremely consequential events. So it is honestly a little bit difficult to pick which will be more consequential. So let me perhaps talk through each of the three in turn.
Yeah.
With the Move Forward dissolution, I think that there's plenty of precedent right there for what happens when a party is dissolved. So if the Move Forward Party is to be dissolved by the Constitutional Court, it is almost certain that there will be a successor party that is set up to accommodate the remaining MPs. Now, this one might be more impactful than in previous cases where, for example, with the Future Forward Party, the party executives were banned. But with the Move Forward Party, it's possible that the MPs that signed on the petition that was found to be unlawful might also be banned. So there might be a bigger impact there. But I think that the long-term trajectory of Thai progressivism is clear. The Move Forward Party, successor party, will most likely inherit the popularity of the current Move Forward Party. So there would be a short-term and medium-term impact. In the long term, I don't think this changes things significantly. In terms of Prime Minister Srettha's possible disqualification as Prime Minister, that could also definitely have a big impact on the current government. But there is also an easy fix. The most obvious solution, of course, is to then allow another pro-Thai Prime Minister to take his place, whether that be Kun Panthawthang Shinawat or Kun Chaikasem Nitisiri. Of course, of these two names, it is far more likely that it would be Kun Panthawthang. A more interesting scenario would be if Kun Panthawthang, who has recently said that she is not ready to be Prime Minister, then says, well, in that case, we will let someone else who is in the Prime Minister candidate bank office. That would most likely either be Kun Anutin Chanvirakul, who leads the Phumthai Thai Party, or Kun Britt Wongsuwan, who is the leader of the Palang Pracharath Party. That would change the makeup of the coalition quite significantly, and I think that we can probably talk more about that if you like. The most consequential thing, though, here, I think, would be what happens to Kun Thaksin himself. Of course, we don't have real evidence that there was a grand compromise or a grand deal that occurred between Pheu Thai and the conservative parties. But it is, I think, reasonable to speculate that some form of agreement took place, even though there was no public MOU, no written agreement. The fact that Kun Thaksin right now is facing legal difficulties of his own leads to speculate that some part of this deal was not being honored, or some part of this deal was being broken. So if Kun Thaksin were pushed to the brink, suggests that there's something that is shaking about the current coalition agreement, and that's something that is definitely worthy of more analysis.
Yeah. Well, talking about the compromise or the deal, Kun Thaksin said something very interesting over the weekend when he went to preside over a Buddhist ordination ceremony for one of the children of his, colleagues in Pheu Thai party. He said that, the confusion that is happening now is attributed to someone in the Ban Pa, and of course, most reporters, political reporters, would immediately interpret it as Kun Pravin Wongsuwan. He said he didn't say yes or no. He said, oh, we don't know who he is, but someone wants to be somewhere, but then he has to play by the rule. That suggests probably that there's a rift between Palang Pracharat Party of General Pravit and Kun Thaksin, you think? If that is the case, there could be a reshuffle of the cabinet or the coalition government. If that should come to pass, what do you think would happen?
Yes. So first of all, for the benefit of our international audience who may not be familiar with the Thai terms, the reason that Kun Thaksin's remark that only the people in the forest are causing trouble is now being linked to General Pravit is because he is chairman of a forest conservation charity, and so that is why his camp is often referred to as the 5 provinces forest camp, for example.
Right.
And I think that it was definitely a very interesting remark. It was the most direct acknowledgement that we have had so far by any political player that there is now a rift in the grand compromise between the conservative parties and Pheu Thai. And Thaksin, in the most direct acknowledgement we have had yet, actually named an actor that he feels is causing this rift.
Yeah.
Now, I think that so let's perhaps take a step back, right? If there was a rift between Pravit and Thaksin, that would mean that there had to be some sort of agreement in the first place. So what could this agreement have looked like? We know that last year, the senators that were affiliated with General Pravit agreed to support Kun Thesa for prime minister.
Yeah.
So we know that Pravit was a main impetus behind the fact that Srettha and Pheu Thai were able to take power in the first place. Secondly, we know that conservatives now have a seat at the table. Kun Pravit's own brother is the Minister for Natural Resources and Environmental Affairs.
Yep.
We can most likely guess that the conservatives and Thaksin asked for joint stewardship of constitutional reform, of political reform of some sort. And I think that it is reasonable to speculate that perhaps as part of any agreement, Kun Thaksin was able to come home. But we don't know if he was actually given space to act the way that he has over the past few months. Yeah. He's been putting his weight around. He's been making a lot of trips to the provinces, meeting with stakeholders in different local areas. It was clear that he was taking on a clear role as, the real chief executive officer of this Pheu Thai government. Kun Srettha was becoming just a chief operating officer. And so if we had to speculate, perhaps it was the fact that Kun Thaksin's activity was going beyond the boundaries of what was being accepted. Perhaps there was a policy disagreement. We don't know for sure. But there was something in this grand compromise that was being broken.
Yeah.
And I think that if we try to consider, so what could be Kun Thaksin's next move, right? Kun Thaksin is now being charged with violation of Section 112 of the Criminal Code.
Yep.
It doesn't appear that he has a lot of moves to make that beyond shaking up the coalition. So one possible move, though, that's very interesting is the fact that in recent months the Pheu Thai government has been considering some form of amnesty for the different political crimes, legal violations we've had. This has been a point of agreement between Pheu Thai and the Conservatives. Everybody was on board with some form of amnesty. The Conservatives wanted amnesty for example, PDRC protesters. The Pheu Thai party wanted amnesty for the red shirt protesters, for example. So there was this joint agreement. And what's being interesting, recently it's been reported that Pheu Thai is now also considering amnesty for Section 112 violators.
Right.
That is not something that conservatives would have been on board with, and it suggests that Thaksin is trying to make a threat here that if sort of rock the boat too much, he is going to try to push for this amnesty that will push him closer to move forward itself.
The interesting part is that if there's a real rift between Kun Thaksin and Kun Prawit, what is Thaksin's strategy? Can he really split up with the Palang Pracharat party? Because that party has about 40 seats. And to survive, this government needs that 40 seats. What is the alternative? The Democrat Party? Nah,
Yes.
that would be a very exciting scenario, right?
I will say that it's interesting that recently Kun Srettha, who is the current leader of the Democrat Party, went down to the three southernmost provinces and he made an announcement that he wants to mold and shape up some, a minister from the three southernmost provinces. He says we shouldn't borrow someone else's nose to breathe.
Yeah.
But, the Democrat Party is an opposition party.
Right.
The fact that they're talking about ministerial positions, ministerial seats, and there's always been these rumors that Democrats are now, a spare part party.
A spare
Pakala.
part. Yes.
It suggests that they are being shaped as some sort of backup option for the Pheu Thai government.
Yeah.
But if I do take a step back, right, I'm going to borrow this concept from political science, international relations. There's a concept called the strategic triangle, right? Where there are three players. This is something pretty new in Thai politics. Usually, in the past 2 decades, I've always been talking about two sides fighting each other. But with this new triangular dynamic, I think that in political science, we would call this a stable marriage, right? Because we have two partners that are allies, and these two partners are both hostile right now to the third partner, which is move forward.
Right.
So there's no room right here for both partners to defect, because any defection would require them, for maximum stability, to then become allies with move forward. So while I think that there might perhaps be some more minor coalitional shakeup at this point, it is probably not wise for Pheu Thai or Thaksin to eject General Pravit's party outside the coalition itself. The main reason being, other conservatives look fewer in number. They still have many institutional prerogatives and advantages that they've accumulated over the past 9 years of rule under General Pravit.
Right.
The Senate is still there. It looks like the Senate election could be delayed if the Constitutional Court rules against the procedures as unconstitutional, number one.
Right.
Number two, under the NCPO, General Pravit and General Pravit were able to make various appointments across the bureaucracy. Having General Pravit, at least as an ally, still makes a lot of sense for Thaksin.
Well, I cannot see a real split in the current coalition without really affecting Kun Thaksin's grand plan to get his daughter become...
His sister.
Yeah, right. Sister? You said
I thought you were referring to bringing his sister back.
that also is part of the grand plan. And that would affect the grand compromise that you mentioned. Because a lot of people in Thailand assume that part of the deal is that Kun Yingluck will come back soon. And Kun Thaksin made it public, recently that, yes, next Songkran festival, Kun Yingluck will be celebrating with us here. But if, a conflict arises between Kun Thaksin and Kun Prawit, then the whole plan could just break down. Well, I don't know where the confidence came from for Kun Thaksin to come out openly the other day saying, that guy in the forest was creating trouble. I mean, he didn't have to say that anything at all, but the fact that he mentioned that indicated that he was quite frustrated and he must be ready for some possible strategic move, or then some observers would say, no, that is Thaksin all over. I mean, he would say things that sometimes he would regret later on, but we don't know. I mean, last Saturday, he showed a lot of confidence in what he was saying. He was challenging, the chief prosecutor. He was saying, there was no ground at all for this allegation against him on the 112 thing, and that they were pressured into taking action against him. He was saying that all this is what? The poison fruit? This fruit came from a poison tree, and this is the result of the coup. And then you would say, have you actually considered how to keep your promise, the grand compromise together, if you would start attacking the coup leaders, that included Kun Prayut, and then you also attack Kun Prawit in the same interview? What do you think? If you were to read Kun Thaksin's mind, what do you think he's trying to do?
I'm inclined to agree with the latter view that this is vintage Thaksin, and that
Thaksin.
he may not be acting in his own best interests right now. I think that last year we saw a concerted effort by Kun Srettha and Suthichai to act conciliatorily towards the conservative camp, right? Right after he was appointed as prime minister, Kun Srettha went to see General Prayut for a transition meeting.
Yes.
A transition meeting, that is a rare tradition in Thai politics. That usually doesn't happen. No. And the fact that two adversaries would then sit together and, watch the birds, walk in the garden together, that was something quite remarkable for Thai politics. Right. So I think that strategy was correct. Why rock the boat when, you have many other problems to solve and you have a common enemy in the form of move forward? The fact that I think Kun Thaksin has been naming names and has been willing to speak his mind recently might indicate not only frustration, as you say, but also a form of misplaced confidence, right? I think that he was too confident that. So let me put it this way: if I were Thaksin and I came back to Thailand and I am now walking as a relatively free man, I would probably not be throwing my weight around. Everybody already knows that Suthichai is in charge and that Suthichai is affiliated with Thaksin. There's no real need to throw your weight around, to be making all these tours, he talks about the people in the forest. Yeah. Well, some people call him, Ban Chan Song Lat, maybe the people on the moon. Yeah. I think that he could have stayed in his moon camp and been a relatively happy man.
Right. Yeah, so it is quite confusing for political analysts to try to understand what Kun Thaksin was after. But then the decisive moment will be on June 18, whether he will get bail or not, too. Well, of course, most people think he will get bail, especially when you listen to his interview last Saturday. He was so confident. No, nothing to worry about. This is all framed against me. And now he was suggesting that now everything is clear for him. The way is clear for him to come back. But then if he doesn't get bail, that is another scenario that is worth analyzing, right?
I think I saw this morning that Kun Thaksin has now submitted an additional petition asking for reconsideration of some sort of the original indictment. Right. So perhaps if things change, then maybe he won't have to appear at all. But for the sake of hypotheticals, let's assume that he is forced to appear. Right. I think that if it would be quite extraordinary if he does not receive bail. Yeah. Right now we see evidence of a grand compromise that's under strain. Right. Not getting bail would probably lead us to assume that the compromise has collapsed altogether.
Yeah. If that was the case, then it would be a really totally new scenario that would plunge the country into another political
quagmire.
Quagmire. Yeah. So, that I think is very crucial because you have the Move Forward Party fate in the court's hand. You have Kun Thaksin's fate in the court's hand, different courts, of course. And then you also have Kun Srettha's political fate in the constitutional court's hand as well. Now, Kun Srettha has his own problems. Now, what do you think will happen after he has submitted his version of the story?
That's a very interesting question, and it's there's always been the speculation that now he has Kun Wisnut Krungam, a renowned legal expert, on his side. Maybe that will help. But on the other hand, my own question is usually Kun Wisnut helps he helps with decision making and ensures that it is legal. This decision has already happened. He had already appointed Kun Pichit Chunban. I think there's only so much that Kun Wisnut can do to head off a ruling that is unethical because he's working around the margins here, right?
Yeah.
My guess would be, I don't want to assign probabilities, but I would say that I think it's probably more likely than not that Kun Srettha will still survive for now.
Yeah.
Especially given the fact that Kun Pichit has now resigned. But it's a 50-50 thing.
It is,
I wouldn't want to speculate too much.
But when Kun Tong Tan said she was not ready to become prime minister, she was suggesting that she was sure that Kun Srettha will remain prime minister, that she didn't need to prepare herself for the premiership. But even if Kun Srettha is back into his government house seat, there's still the question of whether he will be able to remain prime minister with all the pressure coming upon him, with Kun Thaksin, really, looking over his shoulders, saying things, making decisions that would, weaken Kun Srettha, in many, many ways. Do you think the relationship between Kun Thaksin and Kun Srettha will turn out to be another big, issue for the government? Will Kun Srettha survive Kun Thaksin's shadow, so to say?
Well, I think that it is a bit of a mystery in the first place about how Kun Srettha actually was chosen to become prime minister, right? I think that a lot of speculation before the election was that if Pheu formed a government, it would be Kun Thong Tan who became prime minister. And in the past year, we haven't really seen Kun Srettha being able to consolidate any of his own independent power base. The Pheu MPs are loyal to the Shinawat clan. They're loyal to Kun Thong Tan. There were a lot of reports that when Kun Srettha appointed Kun Wisnut as his advisor, there was a lot of discontent from the northeastern MPs that who were fearing for their seats at the next election, or they feel that Pheu Thai has compromised too much and this is a step too far. And in the end, they had to bring in Kun Thong Tan to actually, to calm the MPs. Yeah. And I think that indicates the power dynamics extremely clearly in the Pheu Thai government. Kun Srettha is now taking all the heat. But ultimately he appears to be a dispensable figure. He doesn't have a power base. He doesn't have independent electoral appeal. He's not a Shinawat, most importantly. So he is in quite a weak figure. And the moment that he is no longer, the moment that the powers that be in Pheu Thai feel that he is a liability rather than an asset, I wouldn't expect him to survive.
Yeah. But then you think Kun Thong Tan is ready really to step up? I mean, in all dimensions, in her own real ability to run the country with her limited experience. She might have the father's support, but then it would be even more clearer than in Srettha's case that the father is running the country rather than the so-called official prime minister.
It is interesting because I think so far we've only had one prime minister who had never held a bureaucratic, military, or political appointment before becoming prime minister, and that was Kun Jinglak,
Right.
who famously campaigned on the slogan "Thaksin thinks, Pheu Thai acts."
Right.
So I think that in this case, we have already seen a model of how that kind of government would operate. The question though is it really a question of readiness and more a question of necessity, right? Because if they don't, if Kun Pathonothan says, I'm not going to be prime minister, well, I guess the first question is, she ran for prime minister, so
She did.
she should theoretically be ready to assume the position if the need arose. But in any case, if she said she wasn't ready, would Pheu Thai really be okay with giving up the prime ministerial seat to Phumjai Thai or Palang Pracharat in that case? I think that itself could be a step too far for Pheu Thai.
Yeah.
They've already compromised a lot. How would they explain to voters at the next election that they came in second place? They already broke a promise in saying that they weren't going to form a coalition with conservative parties, and now they did.
Yeah.
And in addition, they're also going to give the prime ministerial seat to Kun Anutin or Kun Brit, both of whom they criticized during the election campaign.
Yeah.
Pheu Thai's prospects are already not looking very good at the next election. I think that this could be a step too far.
Yeah. With that, can we assume that whatever happens, Kun Srettha will remain prime minister for some time yet? Because there's no choice. For Kun Thaksin, there's no real choice. Either it's Srettha or Anutin. And if he hands over the premiership to Kun Anutin, the game will change totally. Because you need to win the next election, Pheu Thai. And you cannot win an election if you don't run the country or you don't have the power to control the whole government system, all the way down to the village level. Because all these populist policies that they are launching or plan to launch, the whole objective is to win votes, right?
And even with that, right now, it's not clear that it would be enough. The polling has not looked good for Pheu Thai in recent weeks at all.
Yeah.
But when you say that the only choices are Srettha and Kun Anutin, well, perhaps it could be the case that Kun Pathonothan, regardless of what she says, is pushed to do the job. So I wouldn't rule that out by any means. And speaking of Phumjai Thai, I think it's been very interesting to watch recently the relationship between the Phumjai Thai party and Pheu Thai, because Pheu Thai has been going against Phumjai Thai's flagship marijuana policy. They said they want to make weed once again a narcotic.
Yeah.
And Kun Anutin, of course, has been vocally against this policy. It only leads you to wonder what sort of bargaining is happening behind the scenes, right? What kind of support, what kind of promises are they trying to secure from Phumjai Thai, perhaps, in return for backing down from this? There are definitely tensions everywhere in the coalition right now, whether between Pheu Thai and Phumjai Thai, or with Pheu Thai and the United Thai Nation Party. Recently, the deputy finance minister, who was UTN affiliated, had to resign from his seat after he said he couldn't work with the new finance minister.
Right.
With Palang Pracharat, we know, Thaksin has said himself, he has trouble with people in the forest. So the gang compromise is holding on right now, but it's definitely under a lot of strain.
Right. And with the leader of Move Forward Party, Kun Chaitawat, making it very clear that whatever happens, it is not possible for Move Forward Party to form a coalition with the Pheu Thai party. Doesn't matter whether it's dissolved or not. I mean, the stand, the position publicly announced by Chaitawat is very significant, meaning that there is no possibility of a coalition, whether it's Move Forward Party or a new grouping under a different banner. that means that the choice is clear that Kun Thaksin will have to work within this current coalition. There's no option. His bargaining power is not that. If you don't work with me, I'm going to the other side. I can go back with Move Forward Party. That option is not available now for Kun Thaksin.
So let's return to the concept of the strategic triangle, right?
Yeah.
So if you think through this rationally, right now, Pheu Thai and the Conservatives are in coalition, and they've excluded Move Forward. Usually when we have a situation like this, it is in the best interest of the outcasts to try to break the bonds of the two and instead form a new partnership with perhaps Pheu Thai. That would hypothetically be in Move Forward's interest to, if their goal is to get into government in the current parliament. I think though that Move Forward's goal right now is not to get into government in the current parliament, right? There's no real hurry.
No.
Right now they hold the ideological high ground in the terms of they remain pure and above the coalitional bargaining that had to happen, the sausage making between Pheu Thai and the Conservatives. They'll Move Forward is trying to position themselves for a landslide at the next election, and so. Yes, I mean you can never rule anything out for sure in Thai politics. Pheu Thai insisted they weren't going to form a government with the Conservatives. Look where we are now.
Right.
So, I wouldn't completely 100% rule out the prospect of Kun Thaksin and Move Forward, having some sort of negotiations in the background in order to keep pressure on the Conservatives to honor their deal. But would Move Forward actually go for it? Whether it's the current Move Forward party or the successor party, I think the likelihood is quite low. There's no real incentive. Right now they're counting down to the next election.
Yeah. So the scenarios that we look at now are quite fluid. We don't know which one is more likely than the other. So if you have to choose, the only possible scenario at this moment, what would be your bet?
Which scenario in terms of what happens next?
The most possible practical scenario that Kun Srettha will survive, Move Forward is dissolved, coming under a new banner. Kun Thaksin will continue to exert his influence over Srettha. Some conflicts perhaps will, arise, but then they would have to move along. No party can afford to break this coalition because it's to nobody's benefit. But then they would continue to be in conflict on a number of issues. Who has the highest bargaining power? Who can really play the game better than the others? So
I think, of the scenarios we've listed so far, what's most likely to happen is that the Move Forward party is dissolved. Because that, the Constitutional Court has already previously ruled that Move Forward's activities constituted an attempt to overthrow the political system. I think that leaves little wiggle room for Move Forward itself. There's little prospect that, if you've already been found guilty of trying to overthrow the political system, not dissolving a party for that, for that when parties have been dissolved for much less, I think would not seem like I would be surprised if Move Forward party is not dissolved.
Well, have you read the counter arguments, the 9-point version from Move Forward Party submitted to the Constitutional Court? They're quite detailed, and they sort of hit each point with their own arguments.
Yes, I've seen the 9-point rebuttal that that Move Forward has announced. I would say that, well, number one, I don't know if that's going to do them any favors with the court, because the court actually warned Move Forward not to make not to make this kind of announcement. Right. So the fact that they've gone ahead and done it, I think is probably not going to earn them plaudits from the court.
Right.
But but also a key component of, and I say this with full admission that I am not a legal expert,
Yeah.
but one of the key arguments that Move Forward has put forward is that the Constitutional Court doesn't have the power or the jurisdiction over this case, and they're not.
Yeah.
They don't have the jurisdiction to dissolve the party. I don't know if that's going to fly with the Constitutional Court when they've dissolved at least two or three parties
Right.
already in the
Right.
past couple, in the past 20 years. So it's I my personal take on this is that I highly doubt that the Move Forward Party in its current incarnation will survive. Now, what their successor party will look like is uncertain. Whether or not any of their MPs would defect to either the Conservative parties or to Pheu Thai is uncertain. We know that many Future Forward MPs when the Future Forward Party was dissolved, did decide to switch sides, so to speak. That's the Move Forward part of the equation. For the other part of the equation, I think, regardless of what happens with Kun Srettha and Kun Thaksin, I think the overwhelming likelihood is that this current coalitional configuration survives in some form.
Yeah.
It doesn't appear to be in, as you say, in either faction's best interest to defect right now. Holding in too much instability could trigger accidentally almost an election or dissolution of parliament. That would not be in Pheu Thai's interest, that would not be in the Conservative Party's interest, and that would very much be in Move Forward's interest. Unless a dissolution happens unless an election is called so soon that Move Forward's successor party is not able to get its act together in time. So perhaps there is that option there. But I still don't, it would take a lot more, it would require more clarity to think through the implications, I think, of that.
Yeah. Well, we have to see what happens this week.
Yes.
And I think what happens this week will be a clear indicator of what will happen after that.
Yes.
And we have to watch Kun Thaksin's every move from now on, because that might determine, the direction of Thai politics. Isn't it funny? 20 years ago, he was in that position of, deciding where Thailand should go. 20 years later, today, now we are talking about the same thing, that we have to look at every move that is made by Kun Thaksin. Where were you 20 years ago when all this, chaotic situation was taking place? Were you still a student then?
I will tell you that I remember very clearly. I was in, I think, first grade when the 2006 coup happened. And I woke up to go to school.
Wow.
And it turns out that school was canceled because of the military coup. On that day, I was a very happy student. But
So you were in grade 1, right?
yes, I was in grade 1.
What, 5, 6 years old?
Probably around that. And now I'm now a PhD candidate.
Yes, candidate. And the same scenario is, repeating itself.
I will say though that I think, compared to 20 years ago, it appears that Kun Thaksin's options are remarkably more limited and restrained than in the past.
Right.
When he was prime minister, the economy that he had inherited from the Democrat government had already shown signs of recovering. Right. His innovative new policies helped the economy grow more, but now the challenges are much more different. Yeah. Thailand is very much stuck in the middle income trap now. Yeah. It's not, the economy is doing much more poorly. Right. The population is aging.
Yeah. Well.
If Pheu Thai had hoped that they would be able to come to power and then reclaim their popularity simply by enacting economic stimulus or by implementing Thaksin-style populist policies to try to re-stimulate the economy, it appears now that that is much more difficult. And so Thaksin is now being left with these political games to play. Yeah. But how that is going to earn him long-term popularity or win back enough support for Pheu Thai to win the next election is still very much something that is unclear.
That's right. He admitted over the weekend that the situation now is much more complicated than when he was prime minister. He said that. And of course, he blamed it on 8 years, 9 years, and he called it a mess. He said, "Let in Thai." He said, in the past 8 years has been a mess. So he's blaming it on, the previous government.
Well, I wonder how his coalition allies are going to feel hearing that.
Yeah.
And at the same time, I think I would like to hear more from Suthichai about, well, if the country is so, if the economy is so down, if the country needs a lot of fixing, well, what are the long-term measures that Suthichai has been trying to pursue to try to get the economy back up in shape, right? At least under the British government, we heard about long-term programs like the EEC. Suthichai had come to power on a campaign on the fact that they felt the EEC wasn't sufficient, and they were going to propose new business zones, right? Yeah. These new areas with tax incentives, with innovation incentives. We haven't heard very much about these new business zones since Suthichai came to power.
The land bridge project. And now the new entertainment complex, including a casino or a few casinos. That is what I think the Srettha government thinks will show its new economic power.
The land bridge, I think, is very interesting and is probably worth a whole episode on its own. Entertainment complexes as the long-term solution for the economy's problems, I'm more skeptical about.
Yeah. So it's very interesting times, and thank you, Ken, for the discussion, the chat today. We will have to wait and see, and then we can perhaps in the next 2 weeks or so we can see a much clearer picture for the future of Thai politics. Thank you very much, Ken, for today. Thank you.
ขอบคุณครับ
สวัสดีครับ
It's always a pleasure.
สวัสดีครับ ติดตามสุทธิชัยไลฟ์กับผมทุกวัน เช้าสายบ่ายเย็น มีเรื่องร้อนเรื่องวิเคราะห์เรื่องสัมภาษณ์เรื่อง Exclusive ต้องที่นี่ที่เดียวครับ ไปติดตามผมใน Facebook 2 เพจสุทธิชัยยุ่นกับสุทธิชัยไลฟ์และอย่าลืม YouTube ครับ YouTube ไปกด Subscribe ที่สุทธิชัยไลฟ์กด Subscribe แล้วกดกระดิ่งเตือนคุณทันทีที่สุทธิชัยไลฟ์มาในมือถือคุณนอกนั้น Twitter ไปกดติดตามและ TikTok ครับ TikTok ล่าสุดนั้นสามารถที่จะถ่ายทอดสดสุทธิชัยไลฟ์ให้ทุกท่านติดตามได้เช่นกันสุทธิชัยไลฟ์ anywhere anytime สุทธิชัยไลฟ์คือเพื่อนที่เล่าข่าววิเคราะห์ข่าวสามารถทำให้ท่านทันข่าวทุกวินาทีจากนี้ไปครับ